The fight for civil rights may seem like a chapter in the history books, but all across the South, there are living, breathing stories of incredible courage and extraordinary resilience in the face of ongoing injustice. Welcome to Southern Gumption. I'm your host, Andy Lee. The South is the battleground for voting rights. While legislators across state lines have been trying to make it harder to vote, there have been everyday people working tirelessly to help their communities get to the ballot box. Voting Rights Renaissance will profile the work of organizations across the South who are transforming challenges into opportunities for connection and collective action.
I can't remember my first time voting, but I can remember my first time voting after losing my right to vote.
That's the voice of Sheba Williams. She's the founder and executive director of No Left Turns, a nonprofit based in Richmond, Virginia.
I myself lost my right to vote in 2004 due to a wrongful conviction. My mother lost her right to vote. My dad lost his right to vote. So it was a very personal thing. But in 2016, when we first started the organization, as a result of myself and my ex-husband putting in over 1,000 job applications between the two of us after his release and after my conviction, I have my bachelor's degree. He had multiple degrees, and we were still being denied employment opportunities. So voting rights was not on our radar at all.
Voting is rarely top of mind for someone being released from prison or jail. Your mind is focused on fitting back into society, finding a job, taking care of yourself and your loved ones. But in many states, people who have been incarcerated have their right to vote taken from them.
Who gets streetlights on their corners? Who gets potholes fixed? Who gets the money for HBCUs? Who gets the money for healthcare? All of that is tied to the vote. So felony disenfranchisement is the removal of a person's civil rights for being convicted of a felony conviction. In our state, you lose your right to vote, serve on a jury, be a notary public, and run for public office whenever you are convicted of a felony conviction. There were so many legislators who wouldn't even have a conversation if they did not see me on a list of approved voters. They would not have a conversation with people who did not have political wherewithal to participate in the process.
So I am Christy Puckett. I work with Forward Justice. I am the senior project manager there. And Forward Justice is a law policy and strategy center and power building center that focuses on the leadership of directly impacted people and communities.
It's interesting talking to all of these different organizations all across the South about felony disenfranchisement. The history of it in North Carolina is very storied, but I also think what is so shocking, and that is replicable in a lot of different Southern states, is that it is so explicitly about taking power away from Black communities and Black voters. Can you talk a little bit about that history and about that timeline and about what that process looked like?
So the Emancipation Proclamation came down in 1865. It took a while for folks to get the word that they were actually free. And then there was this period of what does that even mean, right? And so we enter into Reconstruction, and we see the emergence of these biracial governments emerge in the South. Yeah. And I think that the attempts to squash that power is what we see in 1876 when we first see the North Carolina Constitution disenfranchise people who were convicted of crimes, right? And so, when we look at the history, the point of it all is to take away the voting power of a block of people and diminish that.
So as I started to dig into the history of Virginia and how felony disenfranchisement got into a constitution, why it was in our constitution, because you'll have a lot of lawmakers who say, oh, this is about public safety. This is about a person repaying their debts. This is about X, Y, and Z. But it really was about the history of slavery in Virginia. It really started with newly freed slaves being denied, having a means to remove as many Black people as possible from the voter rolls after slavery was abolished. Digging into our 1902 convention where it was very blatant. And it was very open about what the idea was around putting felony disenfranchisement in our Constitution.
Almost every southern state takes away a person's right to vote while they're serving their sentence or on parole or probation. 4 states take it away permanently.
Our process in Virginia right now has changed quite a bit over the past few decades. The governor is the only person with the power in the state to reinstate a person's rights unless they go through court and appeal. But this governor, this current administration changed the process at the end of 2022. And now they ask about if you have a violent crime, if you have paid all fines, fees, and restitution, and to upload proof if that is the case. The process has become a lot harder. There is no concrete criteria like there was before.
So Ford Justice has worked to re-enfranchise those who have been disenfranchised and to limit the disenfranchisement of new groups. And so I would think that one of the things that we've done was in 2022, we won a historical lawsuit that was the biggest win since the Voting Rights Act of 1965, where over 55,000 North Carolinians received their right to vote back. Those folks were people who were on probation and parole still. So they had completed every other condition, if that was treatment or whatever the sentence condition was, serving active time, and any other community services that they had to receive had been done. They just did not have the money to pay.
That case was CSI v. Moore in North Carolina.
But then, due to the political landscape and our judges here in North Carolina, that decision went up to the Supreme Court and was ultimately overturned. Those folks eventually were disenfranchised. However, 25,000 of those people were going to be eligible to vote at the end of 2022 anyway. And so what we decided to do after that was, we need to be notifying the folks that are re-enfranchised that you now have the ability to vote and you don't have to do anything. You don't have to, as in some states, go back and reapply to have your rights restored. Mm-hmm. Here in North Carolina, once you've completed all the terms and conditions of probation or parole, you are automatically have your rights restored. And so I think that is what we try to do, is try to now, what is the shift?
For Sheba Williams, the storied work for voting rights restoration in Virginia has also had to shift in the past few years.
This fight started well before I got into the work. The late Senator Yvonne Miller put in a constitutional amendment every year before she passed to get felony disenfranchisement removed from our Constitution. Now, Senator Mamie Locke is the one who carries that tradition every year. And we have yet to get it done. It passed through the House and the Senate in the late 80s, and it did not pass the ballot referendum because fear mongering and people were told, this is a public safety issue. But in our work, we have had to go with the tides of which administration is in effect. And luckily for us, the past 3 administrations, over 300,000 people have gotten their voting rights back. But with this administration, a little over 6,000 people have gotten their rights back. In fact, 6,303 people were purged in the last few weeks due to a non-citizen voting issue, which is now in federal court. So we have a coalition. We have a coalition that kind of started a few years ago when momentum was up for the constitutional amendment in 2021. And it is a team of people from across the country who care about restoration of rights that works on bringing awareness, just letting people know that this is an issue that will come up as a ballot referendum. We are also actively traveling all across the state and have been. So for our organization, restoration of rights and voter registration is a day-to-day thing. A lot of people only start doing it around get out the vote time when there's a major election. We do it every single day. When November 5th comes and goes, we'll still be working on restoration of rights and voter registration.
Once CSI kind of happened, then the next big case was the voter ID case. Mm-hmm. And, we've had all these elections for hundreds of years. People didn't have to have an ID. Those were fair elections, democratic elections. And now those have been challenged and people have to show their ID. And so we have done work on that. We are still waiting a decision right now from federal court from when we had oral arguments back in the spring. We work along with Vote Riders, which is an organization that helps folks get their social, all the underlying documents and their ID and ride to the polls, everything. They are amazing. And so that's especially helpful for this community of people coming home and reentering from jails or prison. Oftentimes people don't have their ID. And not only do they not have their ID, they don't have the underlying documents, birth certificate, social security numbers that are required. And so having an organization that helps people obtain IDs, because it can be financially burdensome for some folks, get all the underlying documents, help them navigate the DMV and making appointments for them, taking lifts, paying for lifts to and from.
Yeah.
Like, that is how service should be administered. When we talk about low barrier, we need to have no barrier services where people can just access the services.
The fight for voting rights restoration is long, hard, and often one fought by people who can't vote themselves. But that also means the people closest to the work experience some of the most joy.
Yeah, when I think about folks like my friend Daquan down in Wilmington, who was able to register and vote for the first time at one of our events. He had been working and a member of the Second Chance Alliance for many years. And we were able to witness him fill out his voter registration form, right? I think that most people don't understand that a lot of the people who are working to re-enfranchise people do not have the right themselves to vote. And so he was an example of that. Someone who did not have the right. We knew he didn't have the right. We carried him and the stories of so many others with us inside of that courtroom, inside of any place press conference that we had to attend or talk about this issue. And when he won his right to vote, it was like we had won, right? And it also, as a formerly incarcerated person, it also makes me remember the first time in 2016 when I was eligible to vote, right? And how it felt as a 30-plus-year-old going to register to vote for the first time, because my entire adult life I was involved in the criminal legal system and did not have the ability or the right or the interest half the time in voting. And so it was very daunting. I don't know how any of this works. I don't know any of these candidates. I don't know who believes in me or not. But I know that this is something I didn't have the right to do before, and I have the right to do now, and I need to go do it, right?
My mom also, we got our right to vote back around the same time. And ever since we got our voting rights back in 2013, we both have been election poll workers. We work every election. That is 5 a.m. to 7 p.m. respectively. And it is so ironic because we worked and learned this process inside and out, and still were like making sure that people got to the polls. My mom passed November 2nd, 2021 on election day, and she was supposed to be at Main Street Station, and I was at a polling location way out from where I live. My sister called and said, "Hey, have you heard from Mom?" And I'm like, "Girl, we get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. What do you mean?" She's probably at her polling location. And, it was a historic night. The political climate changed in that election. And I always joke and say, my mom knew that this wouldn't be for her to stick around for. But that's the motivation, like seeing the pride that comes with being able to fully participate in the process. Watching my parents regain their right to vote and actually participate in the process for the first time was something that I never forget. But in November of 2023, 3,400 people were purged from the voter rolls due to an error by the administration. We put a rally together in 48 hours to bring awareness to the issue. We did the rally, I think, on November 1st. And I usually go into my cocoon. Like, I don't want to do work and be bothered with on the anniversary of my mom's passing. But this was something that was really important, right? This is something that I had to show up for. And when I shared that, I was surrounded by people who weren't able to gain anything from the push that we were making. Now, a lot of those people have their voting rights back, and they send the pictures every election day. They're like, "I got my sticker, I voted." And that is something to always kind of push you forward. Like, that's a big thing.
Thank you for listening to Southern Gumption. If you like this episode, please leave us a review and share it with your friends. Make sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss out on an episode. Be sure to follow No Left Turns and Forward Justice for more information about the work that they do. You can find out more about SCSJ and the work that we do at southerncoalition.org. Find us on Twitter at SCSJ or Instagram at SCSJofficial. I'm Andy Lee, and this has been Southern Gumption. For the South, by the South.